Hello, everyone, and welcome to the University of Atlantia, presenting this instructor spotlight, highlighting many of our gender minority fighters. So they're going to do a presentation and Q&A on gender minority armored fighters, navigating and helping to remove the invisible barriers that they undoubtedly face. So I am going to turn it over to Signy, Ingegerd, Puffin, and Tegan. Thank you all.
Thank you. Should I kick it off? All right, I'm getting the nod from Puffin. Okay, well, thank you all for coming. We're really excited that we have such a big group and from all over the known world. It's truly amazing. The presenters today are Duchess Signy. Unfortunately, Dame Sbyslava couldn't make it, but we're leaving her on here in the spirit of sisterhood. Baroness Ingegerd, Baroness Puffin, and I'm the Honorable Tegan of Anglesey. And I'll just go through the bios really quick. Signy, I feel like there's no one in the entire known world who doesn't know who Signy is, but she is a Duchess of the SCA and a Knight. She's a warranted Marshal, and our household is House Hare and Hound. Sbyslava, again, she couldn't be here, but she's also a Knight of the SCA in Atlantia, and her households are Black Dragon and Tavernier. She was going to talk about equipment, finding the right equipment, but the rest of us decided that that could be a whole other class just on armoring up and what weapons are right for women and gender minorities. So maybe that will be on the horizon. Stay tuned for that. Then we have Baroness Ingegerd. She is a retired landed baroness. She's in the Order of the Sea Stag, which in Atlantia is an award given for combat instruction. It's an order of high merit. She's also a warranted Marshal. Her house is Crack House. She is head squire to Sir Randall, and she's been doing the Reaper Challenge. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but it's a 100-day Pell challenge.
I completed it twice just recently for the second time.
Awesome. Then we have Baroness Puffin. She is Order of St. Aidan's in Atlantia. That's a fighting unit order, and it comes with Kingdom Honors. And her house is House Honey Badger, and she is squired to Duke Christoph. And I'm Tegan of Anglesey. I'm an Order of the Kraken, which is an order of high merit for armored combat. I'm a Marshal. My household is the Free Company of Anglesey. I was been the warlord, and I was this last year's Pensick Field Commander, where we got the Vexillum Atlantiae Award, which is a fighting unit award. So enough of that. I'm going to switch it over to Ingegerd really quick, because she's going to talk about what is an invisible barrier and why are we doing this class.
Okay, so invisible barriers, why are we doing this class? I was first approached by university actually last year saying, hey, we want to see a lot more women and gender minorities in Crown. That way we more likely are going to have, you know, a king or queen, a little bit more diversity. I said, well, why don't we back that up? Why don't we just make fighting more accessible? Because you're not going to get that unless you have that foundational entry level for people to even just start and enjoy it. And honestly, the more of us that are out there, whether we want to be kings, queens, royals, or sovereigns of whatever title that is winning crown that you choose, if you want that, you got to start by having more people to fight. So why not make it more accessible so people are more welcome and it's easier for them to get there? And some people might say, well, it's already welcoming. It's already accessible, because I accessed it. But that's where invisible barriers come into play. Obstacles that you might not see. For instance, you could have a jet ski and hit a river and go flying all over the place where boats can't, because there's rocks under the water. So those rocks are an obstacle for those boats that have deeper keels and are going to scrape bottom. And they're not going to fare well. They're going to crash. They're going to sink. It's not a good thing. But likewise, you take that same jet ski and that same boat, put them out in the open ocean, and you get the idea of there's different obstacles for different things. And it's not always apparent because we all have different experiences. Even those of us that are teaching this class, even though we have some similarities of things that we've shared and experienced, we all still will have a unique experience, a unique path, and a unique journey. So while we can lean on each other, it's good to honor the fact that we're all unique, and taking time to listen to each other to address those barriers helps. So different types of physical barrier or invisible barriers. You could have physical, and I'm not just talking about your physical differences, but differences in gear, differences in how you occupy or move through space, differences into just how the space feels when you go into it, like the environment. Like for instance, am I going to a practice that's in a park that has really bad lighting and I don't feel welcome there? I don't feel safe as a woman in today's day and age, or is it a public park that's easy to access, park at, and be seen? Social. So for instance, she's not here yet, and there's a couple others that may or may not be here, but this is a conversation I've had with a lot of women on the field, and not just women, but just in general, it gets put on the backs of women a lot, is expected women's labor. There's a woman I know who, she was in the middle of a tournament, she was doing really well, and she's about to get going, and people interrupted her in the middle of the tournament, pulled her to the side and said, we need you, it's an emergency. She's like, what? Like, what about the sandwiches? What about the food? And she's like, are you kidding me? Get someone else to take care of it. Like, there's a cooler, like I'm busy fighting. So that expected women's labor sometimes gets put onto people and becomes a barrier. Childcare, if there's parenting involved, biases people have, whether they're conscious or subconscious, or just gender norms. And again, we can get into that where it's more than just women, it's a broad spectrum of gender. Heavy spotlight or invisible. So just by being a minority, you might have a lot of people looking at you and putting a lot of expectations and weight on you right away. At the same time, you might also get ignored. So there's an extreme spectrum there. And a lot of times you'll pass through both feeling like everybody's putting all this pressure on you and expecting you to be this great hope. And at the same time, they might also be ignoring you because they don't have high hopes for you because they're underestimating you for the same exact reasons. So that can be a lot of pressure that you don't see because you might not go through it if you were a cisgendered average height guy. So cultural, this can go with SCA inter-kingdom, this can go outside of society, but it can also go into our own culture of our own backgrounds, cultures that we grow up with, even our own family's culture outside of the SCA. So these things play a part in what could be barriers and where we feel our comfort levels, or even personal history if there's domestic violence, or even like, for instance, my spouse and I, we train together. We are comfortable training together. Not every couple is, and I respect that and I understand why. I've been in relationships 20 some years ago when I was a fighter where I was not comfortable training with those partners. It depends on that relationship. But again, that's a barrier. So all these are things that not everyone is going to have to worry about, but just because not everyone is going to have to worry about doesn't mean people are going to not have to worry about it, because it's a very real thing. So what do? We look for a way to go around it, over, anticipate, mitigate, or negate it. And the more we can do those things and have a plan in place before we get to those barriers, or the more we're conscious of them or are thinking to look for things of like, hey, I didn't think about this. Is there anything that's a concern? And you listen and you come up with a way and a strategy, you're helping as an ally at that point. So whether you're a marshal, a teacher, a trainer, just a fellow fighter, let me be clear, you do not have to be someone's trainer to help them. Just by welcoming them, listening to them, and asking if they would like help and how they would like help is a huge thing towards helping and being an ally. So we've come a long way over the decades. There's a lot of language. We could spend a whole class on that, of how the SEA has changed in their approach to handling gender and culture and social like issues on the field and diversity. But we're going to try to get through things that are actionable steps to get forward rather than looking too much to the past right now. I think it's important to look towards the past. A lot of us have fought for decades. I know between Signy and I, and I'm sure others, like I first took the field in armor, loner armor, when I was 18 at a practice, and it barely fit me. Like it really didn't fit me at all. It legally covered me, but I couldn't move in it. So that was a barrier to me really even just practicing. And so, that was in 1997. So I've had the decades to see how the society's changed, but I'm looking more for what actionable things can we do with that experience, things that have helped or things that might help others. So we're going to share that today. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
So 5 ways to remove these invisible barriers.
It's actually 4 now.
That's 4. Okay.
It's 4.
I must have forgotten to drop. That's all right. So we can't count, but that's okay. Creating an inclusive practice. So I'm going to cover that. Puffin's going to cover knowing the women and gender minority fields of the kingdom. By the way, if you are a woman in Ethelmark or a woman that trains with any of us currently, and you're like, hey, why wasn't I invited? Guess what? We're going to do more of these sessions. We just started with this quick little group to start, just because a lot of us have leaned on each other for many, many years already. And as more women come and join and become a part of this culture and community that we have, the more we can incorporate, because all of us have things of value to say. It shouldn't just fall on any one woman's back or one person's back to explain ways to help us, because we're all going to have different needs and we're going to have different perspectives. Signy's going to cover learning effective training and coaching. And Tegan's going to cover respecting a fighter's goals and limitations. And number 5 was going to be armor. As Tegan said before, we are going to cover that in another class on its own if there is interest. All right, so creating an inclusive practice. So you got a little bit of my SCA resume of, you know, I'm a baroness and I have a crazy household and all this stuff, and I've completed the Raver Challenge. But in addition to that, someone said the barriers. Oh, cool. So in addition to that, mundanely, I'm a certified art teacher. I just got out of the field of education, but I've spent the greater part of, like all the part of the last 10 years as an art teacher, full time. And with that training and education, and not just teaching art, but just being a 3rd generation teacher, I've been exposed to a lot of pedagogy. How do you communicate? How do you help people get into problem solving, critical thinking, things like that. So I applied a lot of my teacher practices in teacher psychology and background to starting a local practice about 7 years ago. So I moved down here. First year I took to settle in, and then about less than a year in, I started like meeting Atlanteans, going to events and everything. And there wasn't a local practice, and people wanted a local practice. I said, okay, let me work on getting my marshal again. I haven't fought in a long time. Let me see. And I got bit by the bug, and I started to fight again by getting into marshaling. But it was also a chance for me to set the tone for practice. And I realized I was creating an environment of my own classroom, in a sense. And people think environment of classroom, they might just think of the physical environment, but it's so much more than that. If you think in the sense of branding, like a company, how does it look? How does it communicate? Look at the physical space. Look at the structure you have. Is it inviting? Does it feel safe to go to? Is it well lit? Where do you put your water? Do you have chairs? Do you have shade for people that are guests that are watching? Can you safely barricade parts off? Can it handle different weather and temperatures? You know, these are things to think about in your physical space of how's that going to affect your students. And then amenities, again, from a woman's perspective or a minority's perspective, if we're worried about things that we shouldn't have to worry about, like assault and just getting home safely or going somewhere safely, and it's a new practice. Like, for instance, I had a friend who called me up the one day. He's like, hey, you really need to go to this practice at this guy's house. I go, well, I don't know this guy. This is when I moved to Atlanta. Yeah. No, you need to go to this guy's house. He's just like 4 hours away in the middle of nowhere, and you might lose your GPS. So print out some maps, and it's down a dirt road, and good luck. You should go. There's a swimming pool there. There's a lot of fighters there. You'll have fun. And I don't care how experienced I was with ESC. I'm like, I'm not doing this. And now I go to that guy's practice all the time. But again, there's a sense of safety. If I had somebody to go with to that practice, it'd be a whole nother ball of wax. But I was going to risk going to a 3-dog night practice at Duke Anton's just on my own when I didn't know anybody. I was like, no, I'm not driving in the middle of nowhere. So, you know, is it safe? Is it inviting? And how are you getting communication out about your practice? And it might sound really basic, but a lot of times people will make posts and forget that not everybody knows that you've nicknamed this person's backyard like the Glen. Meet us at the Glen. Well, that's cool. You got this little trendy cultural thing, but that's going to cut off your new people from coming.
No, you're not. Get out of here. Get out of here.
All right. So, you know, those are things you want to keep in mind of how do you communicate. You want to put the time, the date, the location, and a point of contact. Somebody they can get up with if they have questions and say, hey, I'm available. Communication, another part of communication. I actually have a book here. I'm not making this up. You'll understand why when I say, this is the first days of school. This is something a lot of teachers use. There are some of his practices that help for school teachers. A lot of it's geared towards school teachers, but a lot of this applies to practice. So he talks about setting your classroom culture by how you talk to your students, how you greet them, routines you set up, because it sets an expectation of this is what's to be expected. For example, when I was editing this slide yesterday, I was doing it on my phone, in my van, parked at the park I usually practice at, because one of our local fighters wanted some extra drill and practice time that wasn't just slugging it out, but was like drills and footwork. And he really wanted to work with me, and my husband's like, I want to too. So the three of us were going to meet up. Well, I was so busy typing and I felt bad because I can tell they both showed up. I was there early, and I rolled my window down to listen. And my husband was so used to the practice of me saying, hi, oh my goodness, I'm so glad you made it and you're here. I look forward to working with you today. So he greeted him, let him know that he wanted him to be there, and thanked him for coming. And I was laughing because exactly what I was writing, establishing routines, setting a tone, that's exactly what you want to do, because even if you're not there as the trainer, you're setting a tone. And sometimes it's going to be hard if it's an established practice, but if you are the marshal, you can help do that. And create a culture that you're communicating verbally more and reassuring people that they are wanted there. And that is huge, because people get in their own heads. So it's a lot easier for them to not do that if you communicate, hey, you're here, you're valued. What can we do to help? Here's some things we have to help. And then even following up with them after practice. So you also want to envision what it could be, not just what it always has been. There's been practices I've gone to, this is over like 30 years of experience. Please don't think I'm picking anyone out, where you just kind of show up in someone's backyard, everyone puts on armor and they beat the crap out of each other, and that's it. They don't talk much. People that know each other kind of just gather in a little circle together. They're not necessarily realizing it, but by doing that and not saying, hey, come sit with us, wait till you hear this story, you're kind of ostracizing those that are new. And it might not be the most productive practice. So if you want a more productive practice, look at what could be different, and you can try it. And you might think, well, this works for me and I got knighted, but you know what? You don't know that if other things could have worked for other people, and it doesn't cost anything. It's just taking the time to think and try new things. One of the things we look at as a teacher is Maslow and Bloom's taxonomy. If you're not familiar with that, Maslow is a theory of hierarchy of needs. For instance, you're not going to learn if you're in a stressful environment and you have all these other worries and things. But if you have your physiological and your psychological needs met, if you feel mentally safe, if you feel physically safe and reassured, like reminded about the rules of the list, if you don't have to fight if you don't want to, reminding people that kind of helps put them at ease, or they can stop anytime they want. Or yes, you can pick up this sword and hit that pal. You're not obligated to fight. That helps people feel a little bit more relaxed. Letting people that know that they belong is another part. And then it gets up to where they start to feel like they belong. They have faith in that. They have their own esteem, and then they have their self-actualization of they actually want to achieve their goals. So you've removed those barriers that were there to them learning. And then you can get into learning. Then you can get into, okay, now here's the knowledge. Now you can apply it. Now you can work on it. All right. So instead of training the big fish, instead of training the big fish in a little pond, in bear pits, you're being a little bit more aware of meeting different types of learning needs. And we can spend a whole class on that too. And I don't want to take up the entire class just talking about my stuff. Again, thank your fighters for coming. Include them in talks and open your circle. So if you start telling a fun story of a, no kidding, there I was, you can then pull in and say, hey, come over here. You need to hear this too. All right, next slide. All right, so these are things that are good that I look for when I go to a practice, or if I'm going to host a practice. Bathrooms available for use throughout and before the start of practice. And I'm stressing that because guess what? I'm a middle-aged woman. If I've got to use the bathroom before I put my armor on, and I got to take all my armor off to use the bathroom, I'm going to want to go use the bathroom before I armor up. And if I can't use the bathroom until the very start of practice, like when people are actually starting to slug it out, that means I have to wait, get into the bathroom, use it, come out, then armor up. So I might be 15 to 20 minutes. I might be 15 to 20 minutes, 30 minutes even, if I'm like really waiting, if there's other people waiting for the bathroom even. I've had this happen. And people have been fighting that whole time. Well, by the time I get armored up and I'm ready to go, they're already taking a break. So it's lost practice time, and practice time is precious because you don't have it all times of the week. If possible, have an indoor location. This again mitigates weather, mitigates some obstacles and things. It makes it a little bit safer in some ways. Public setting is good. If you're going to have a private practice, I get that. Sometimes all you have is a backyard or someone just wants a quick thing. But having a public setting so people feel like they're not alone and that there's people watching and there's witnesses, that helps too. And as people said, having to use the bathroom, sometimes needing to get changed. If you tell me there's a porta-john to get changed in, I'm not going to be as comfortable putting on the protection I need as some guys might feel. Space for water, Gatorade, trash, not combatants, and consistent practice. You want your practice so consistent that people almost don't have to check your page and know where it's going to be, know what day of the week, know the location, and know the time. Because guess what? Then they'll start to show up to your practice. I can't tell you how many times I've had people both in kingdom and even out of kingdom spontaneously show up at a practice I've held. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is some dude from Ethelmark showing up with his entire family and they're pulling all these polearms out of the car. It's like, cool, because they knew we would have practice. So that consistency is key. All right, next slide. Okay, so again, this is just going to touch base. You want to welcome and thank everyone for coming. Ask what they would like to work on and today and how. Now, sometimes people don't want to tell you because they want to see if they're going to be able to like psych you out by like throwing a feint, throwing a rap. So they might not want to tell you, but if you normalize that and say, well, hey, I don't want to tell you right now what I'm working on. I just want to work on it. And can we talk after? You're normalizing that communication of everybody is helping each other succeed and raising goals rather than just everybody's trying to be the big fish in a little pond. Check in with everyone. Use their names. Use their names, use their pronouns. Is it their first time in armor? This is something I like to do as a marshal. The first time you get in armor, you probably forgot, or maybe you didn't because you knew, it feels weird and you are all off balance. You've got this heavy weight on your head that's made you top heavy. And that's an alien enough feeling. Just let them get used to the alien feel of armor before setting them loose. Now, some people might take to a little quicker, but acknowledge that, talk them through that. Let them experience what that weight feels like. Ask how their day was. Don't make it just about practice. Ask how their day is. How are you doing? And give them that chance to talk so you can create those bonds. Normalize not knowing everything. Ask what they see or what they wonder about. Your job as an ally isn't to be like, I am assuming the role as your trainer and I've taken this class, so now I'm an expert on how to teach you how to do everything. Don't do that. Please don't do that. You really want to make sure that you are listening twice as much as you're talking and give them their space to do what they want to do and listen to their goals and support them on those goals. Everyone takes turn actively listening and again, follow up with them. Next slide. Purposeful communication. Again, verbal, there's a skill where it's called parroting. If somebody tells you how their day was, repeat it back to them. So it's the same message, but slightly different words to confirm that you heard what you think you heard. And then they can correct it if it's wrong. That's one way to actively listen and show that you're listening and show that you value. It's like if somebody comes to me and says, I really want to work on my flat snap and hiding it a little bit more so it looks like there's no tell. Okay, so what you're telling me is you're trying to reduce tells or the mechanics of the shot, and then they can confirm which it is. But again, you're repeating it back to them just like a parrot would repeat it back. Reassure them. There's multiple ways of explaining something. If you show them a move and it doesn't work that way, think of a different way to teach it, because sometimes people need to hear it a different way for it to click. Again, listening is the number one key. Eliminate distractions. Use positive facial expressions. Be very mindful of that. Online, announce your practice, your date, your time, location. And again, this is something for you. Think back to the happiest classes you ever had where you were excited to go to class. I don't care if it was in school. I don't care if it was at camp, whatever it was. You had a good teacher somewhere or a good mentor somewhere, and you felt like you learned a lot in that class. Think about how much easier it was for you to learn that information because you weren't stressed and scared, but because you felt comfortable, safe, and like you could trust that teacher. Include in accessory discussions. Again, if you have a round table, pull them in. Next slide. Do's and don'ts. Remember, it's about them. When they are drinking water or resting, ask how or if they would like help. That's important. How they would like help. Sometimes they just like, I just want to sit here quiet. That's fine. Respect their answer. Interrupt those who interrupt them. One of my favorite allies is a man named Earl Rob DeRath. And Earl Rob has been in so many practices with me where sometimes there's a guy who all of a sudden is the expert and wants to interrupt what I'm actively doing, whether it's fighting somebody else or even fighting them. They will stop and they'll just start spewing at me, talking nonstop when I'm there to fight. And I'll find every which way to kind of like get out of it so I can get back to doing what I'm doing. But they feel the need to kind of hold me captive. He's very good at interrupting them and just going, hey, okay, I need to pick up with you. And it pulls them away just enough that I can escape. Or he'll be like, come on, you're coming with me, we're fighting. And they don't really argue with him because he's got that white belt. So he's using that point of power in society and culture in a positive way without really being like aggressive, but at the same time, very to the point. Acknowledge their goals. So if somebody has a goal, listen to it and acknowledge it. Again, you can use parroting for that. All right. Don't assume the role of the trainer. Don't interrupt them working. Don't assume you know more. Don't forget to include them when stories are being shared, and welcome to stand nearby. Don't put unrealistic expectations on them, but also don't underestimate them. My very first tournament, I had people going, you're going to be queen. I'm like, I just want to fight this first tournament. Let me have a normal fighting experience where I'm allowed to lose a whole bunch, where I'm allowed to go through the process of learning, becoming a squire. Let people have their journey without trying to push them to be the most all the time. Don't pressure them to authorize and then go win crown by their own hand. Allow them to pursue their happy. All right, next slide. I think that's it for me.
All right, on to Puffin.
Hi, I am Puffin in the SCA, known by the Puffin on my shield, and my pronouns, I'll take any. Most people use she, her for me, but you can use any. I identify as genderqueer, but I also don't really make a big deal out of it. So some people know it, some people don't. It's kind of whatever. I don't have as many slides as Inga. I just don't. She's an overachiever, and we say that about her a lot. But when you're talking about knowing them, and that was an important thing that Inga mentioned, was get to know them, right? Get to know us. Unless you've been a woman or a gender minority fighter, you have no idea what expectations we're carrying. And she touched a lot on like the expectations people lay on us. Oh, who are you going to squire to? Are you going to be a knight? Are you going to fight in this tournament? Oh, I can't wait to see you win crown. I have people coming up to me all the time at every tournament. And I can tell you who it is. And sometimes it's people I don't expect also. Every single time. I can't wait to see you win crown. Thanks. I'm trying not to go 2 and out right now. And I haven't been in armor in 6 months because I just had surgery and I'm recovering. So this is my first time back. And I'm thrilled to know you expect me to fight at night level today. Thank you. Right? Signy with the yes, that is my shield. But like that is that we have the expectation of others. We also have the expectation of ourselves. When I first started, and it was not that long ago, I started fighting in 2016. But at the time, most of the fighters in my area that are fighting now were either not in my area then, or were not really fighting then, right? Or they were doing other things or whatever. So a lot of times I'd be the only one at a tournament that was at all a not man, right? Like that, it was me, or it was me and Signy, or it was me, Signy and Inga. And, sometimes we'd get Tegan if we were up north, but we were really lucky. But that was, also she had a kid in there, right? So, there's a lot of times it was 1 or 2 of us. Now there's so many more. This past weekend, I had 3 fighters in my list that were women or gender minority, and that was one of 4 lists, right? Holy cow, it was amazing, right? But every time we walk on, we get a lot of people going, okay, I'm rooting for you because you're a woman and I can root for you. And I'm like, cool. I'm your only hope. Fantastic. Thank you.
Only one.
Right, exactly. Like so women get that naturally, and help them know that they don't have to be that way. And sometimes it takes another woman. Sometimes you can just, if it's somebody you can say, you don't have to carry anybody's expectations but your own. And just saying that is helpful. We are often, any AFAB person who has grown up in this society knows that men are afraid that women will laugh at them and women are afraid men will kill them, right? That translates to the field. The more comfortable we are with someone, the easier it is for us to say, that shot was light. Because it's disappointing, you know, you want to hit them with a good shot, right? You're hitting them, and you know, they're hitting you. Everybody that fights wants to hit with a good shot. So it's disappointing when you don't. And women are trained to not disappoint you. Even each other, right? So it's hard sometimes to say light, but the more people know you, the more comfortable they are with you. The more women and gender minority people know you're not going to get upset when they say light. You're going to go, okay, I just need to hit you harder. Or, yeah, absolutely, that was light. Don't take that. And if it was light, you know, if you know you've hit them light and you say, don't take that, that is a phenomenal way, especially in practice, that is a phenomenal way to cue to them that not only are you not going to get upset if they say light, but you're expecting them to call it light. Right? Set that expectation. You don't have to include us. It's important to include us without singling us out. Why is this even a thing? Because people go, oh, look, we've got a female fighter. Come on, come on. Oh, we're really proud of her. Oh, really? Can we just be a fighter? Like I am a gender fluid person who fights. Signy is a fighter who happens to be female. Inga, a fighter who happens to be female. Tegan, a fighter who happens to be female. We are fighters first, and we want to be a fighter. So just include us. Be like, hey, this is a local fighter from our practice. Everybody can see. You could introduce us with our pronouns. They use they, them pronouns. Cool. Like, now you've acknowledged who we are without making us feel weird. You've acknowledged our pronouns. You know us, but we're just a fighter from your practice. We want to be a fighter from your practice. We want to be a fighter from your barony. That's what we want. A lot of people will look at a woman who's not fighting well and say, you need to work on your intent. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard that. Usually my response is, my intent right now is to get out of this conversation before I do you harm. But to be perfectly truthful, it's terrible advice. It's the worst advice ever. Women and gender minorities have so many other things that we're thinking of on the field. You could say, it's clear you weren't really focused on the fight if you want to, or better to ask, so it looked like you weren't quite focused on the battle at hand. What was going through your mind? Or you could just say, what was going through your mind during that fight? Instead of assuming you know what's on their minds, ask them. You know, Inga emphasized the importance of listening. Ask them. Guaranteed what they say is not going to be what you expect. It's not, oh, well, you know, I was afraid that I was just trying to hit them with this one shot. It's probably not that. It was probably, well, I was trying not to trip on my legs. And then I was remembering that this person said that they'd be watching me. And I had this moment, this flash of hoping that I didn't let them down. And then that turned into a minor anxiety attack, which I was trying not to turn into a panic attack. And then I realized that I'd blocked 3 things while I wasn't really paying attention. And I thought maybe there was an opening, but that's not a problem with intent. It's a problem with all these other things that need to be worked on. So just ask instead of assuming you know what's going through their head. Many women and gender minority fighters tend to prefer melee. That is where we can just be one of the crowd, right? Nobody's telling us, I hope you win crown. Nobody's telling us, boy, I can't wait till they knight you because we're gonna have another female knight in the kingdom. I'm trying not to swear because this is recorded, but really? Do you go around like telling somebody that's been fighting, you know, doesn't have maybe a grant level even, Do you start talking to them about how you're hoping that they're going to get knighted soon because they're just really cool? I mean, come on, we try not to do that with other peerages. Let's not do it to the women, especially not as we need another female knight. Sometimes that's not their path. But in a melee, women can be part of a team. Often we fight with the people we train with, and those people have respect for us and understand that when we're giving an order, it's because we know what we're talking about. We are fighting with people we're comfortable with and who trust us and who we trust, so that we can know that they're going to treat us as another fighter and they've got our back, but they're also expecting us to have their back, right? So there's a back and forth and a give and take in melee, and we can be part of a group, and we don't have to carry the weight of anybody on our shoulders. We're just there with our team, not letting our team down, and our team are people that we're locked into practice with all the time. They're the people we have relationships with. They're the people we have the close friendships with. Ideally, if we want that to carry over to tourney, if we want that to carry over, everybody in the kingdom should know everybody in the fighter, right? Like, so when you fight a lot, all the fighters know each other, right? That should extend to all the female fighters and all the gender minority fighters. And we should all feel when we step on the field, like we're on the same side, even if we're fighting each other. Because I'm as happy for you when you beat me as I hope you are when I beat you, right? Because at the end of the day, whoever wins, we should be going home or hanging out at the fire and maybe having a drink or a snack or a story or a song or something. We should be doing that together because we're friends at the end of the day. And establishing that throughout the kingdom, being welcoming without being focused on gender is fantastic.
Your knight did something really cool once. He called everybody the field by saying, I would like all the fighters and all the male fighters to come to the field.
Chris is awesome.
It was fantastic. Then he winked at me. Thank you.
Exactly. And then the last thing is, when do you let go? I have had people come up to me and go, there is a woman in my fighter practice and she's very discouraged and she's having a hard time going. And I've tried to help her as much as I can. And she's just sure that all the bad things ever are going to happen to her. Let it go. Because trying to force us to fight when we're unhappy isn't going to help either. If you try to resolve the issue and you do your level best, let us follow our heart and our path. And maybe we'll get back to it someday and maybe we won't, but guaranteed, if you try to convince us to fight somehow, oh, well, I don't like to see any female fighters leave the field, or, I want to support my fellow female, my fellow fighters who happen to be female. And I want to make sure that, let it go. Same as you would a man who says, my heart's not in it anymore. Let it go. And it's okay, right? We want to do everything we can so that it doesn't get to that spot. But sometimes women have other things come up. Women have other priorities happen. Women get tired. Women don't, just the same way as other men. So if you let people go when it's time, when they want to, without grief, without guilt, without, oh, you're just letting us down, then if they ever want to come back, they'll feel welcome again, right?
I left for about 10 years off the field and I came back.
You never know what the future brings, but if their heart's not in it anymore, let their heart not be in it anymore. So that's all I've got. Signy.
Signy.
Hey, first of all, thanks to everybody for checking out this roundtable. There's so much information to go over, and I know Ingegerd, we were just saying, boy, we need to write a book. But I'm Duchess Signy, Sir Duchess Signy, and just recently got knighted. Super happy about it, and I just have taught a couple other classes about how to help train trainers to train fighters, how to train fighters to train better. And so I'm just going to take on this learning effective training and coaching. It's just bullet points and it does touch on a lot of what everybody else has already said. Puffin, not everybody's gonna love it, and not everybody's gonna be happy. I mean, that just made me, I was like, I hear you. There are days when we're just not into it, and nothing's gonna change that. That's been one of the hardest things. So my first thing is listen to the trainee, right? There are a lot of times people are unhappy, and I know that I face this a lot. I'd get super frustrated with something, and when it would come down to it, it'd be like, well, my helmet doesn't fit right, and so I hate fighting. My shield's too heavy, and it sucks, and I don't know how to change that. Or this leg equipment keeps slipping off my ass. What do I do? It's not always that simple. It might be, I have trouble with childcare or whatever. But if you're a coach and you want these women to stay on the field, it really is imperative to just ask the question, like, why? What can we do that would make you feel better? What is making you hate getting on the field right now? What is making you happy when you get on the field? And then really listen to the answer. As coaches, we tend to teach what we know. We assume that we know that everyone else is dealing with the same problems we've dealt with, but somebody might have something completely different, I mean, so it behooves us to really just open our ears and take a deep breath and say, okay, let's talk about it. You want to get smaller fighters, gender minority fighters, women on the field. Look at percentage of body weight. My twin Thor and I were having this discussion about percentage of body weight. 30% of my body weight is about as much as I can carry and still be nimble. And 30% of my body weight, I think I figured it out. Or relative to a big guy anyway, it's a lot less, right? So if Kuhn, who's 240 pounds, can carry a 10-pound shield, it feels like nothing to him, but it's 3 times as heavy to me. So if you have a smaller fighter, you have somebody that hasn't got as much muscle mass for whatever reason as your big fighter guys, you need to really, really think about shedding weight on armor as much as you can without shedding protection. So, and I've run into this problem that you need to have lighter weight, but greater coverage, because smaller people, pound for pound, are going to take much more of a beating. I've said this before, that if you hit an ox with a baseball bat, it will be annoyed. But if you hit a bunny rabbit, you will kill it. So you need to think that smaller people are taking it more on the chin than the bigger guys. All right. So I can't shed leg armor. I can't shed shoulder armor. I can't shed all kinds of things that I'd like to get rid of. Because I'll die. And I just say that whatever you get on a smaller fighter, make sure it's as light and protective as it can be. Heavyweight, I mean, I started off with a pair of leg armor that with some steel legs that weighed 18 pounds, and I could take 2 steps and then I was done, So let's work on that. Also, women need armor that fits. If you have people that are unhappy getting on the field, 9 times out of 10, better equipment's going to fix the problem. I know that sounds overly simple, but if you have a sword that fits your hand, if you have a shield that you can pick up, if you have a helmet that you can actually move your head in and not feel like you're going to topple over, you're in good shape. I've struggled with things like gorgets because women have small necks, and when I move my shoulders up, I don't have any room for a gorget, and I'm always fighting up. So again, when your trainee says, I need help with something, really, really take the time to look at it. There's a better solution out there somewhere. So keep asking until you find it, because you want people to be happy and they're going to stay on their field if their armor feels like $1 million. Everybody always asks me, what should I train on? What should I do on the field? What's the best way to be the most effective fighter I can be? And just because I'm your typical coach and I only know it works for me, I'm going to tell you the best advice I ever got was work on your defense. Stop thinking about throwing shots and start thinking about how you're going to stay in a fight. I'm a small fighter. Lots of us are smaller. Some of us aren't. Puffin's got like a height advantage and But the thing that the smaller fighters really have in common is we need to cross through that danger zone of your opponent's B range in order to get to your A range or B range. So you need to be comfortable with defense. And if you're going to drill in anything, if you're an instructor and you want your student to get better faster, women especially need better technique and probably better fitness and better foot movement to get into a fight and then stay into a fight, right? So if you can learn how to block effectively before you do anything else, footwork and blocking, that will keep you in a fight long enough that you can actually employ your coolest shot ever. You'll find your target if you can stay in that fight long enough, right? Fitness, fitness, fitness. We don't talk about this in the SCA enough, but if smaller, the best small fighters that I see on the field, and like I said, I say small, and I'm just trying to encompass everybody within this large gender range, okay? We are talking gender minorities. We do tend to be the smaller people. So the smaller fighters that I see on the field right now that are highly successful tend to be in pretty good shape. If you are a small fighter, you need more muscle pound for pound than some big guy that has all the advantages of reach and height, because you have to move to win. You're not going to have a static fight if you're 5'1" like me. So you need to really think about what can you do to build muscle and to build endurance and to build stamina. And that's going to be outside of the fighting field. You know, our training time is precious. That may not be the best time to get in shape. What you really want to be doing is thinking about when you're not on the field is like, what did I do today to get some better muscle in my arms and my shoulders? What did I do to improve my general fitness? Did I go for a walk? Did I walk the dog? Could I ride my bike? You know, can I do something? Again, we don't talk about it enough, but you will be able to win fights, maybe not by throwing the most blows, maybe by not throwing the most head blows, but if you can stay in there long enough, if you can outlast the other guy, you have a significant advantage. And that's what small people have. You have movement, you have some non-traditional like shot angles that might surprise people. You can defend until your opponent gets tired. And you can use shots and fitness and all this footwork creatively to outthink the other guy. And that's where your success is going to come on the field. You need better technique to stay up. So it's not about hitting people so much as it is not getting hit yourself. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but you're going to need to work on that. And we'll have a question and answer session after this. I don't want to take any more time. Tegan, what do you got to say?
If I could interject one thing first.
Yep.
Especially regarding that smaller fighters need fitness and so on. That is absolutely true. But AFAB fighters in general have to have solid technique.
Yep.
Even if you're tall like me, I'm tall and I weigh over 200, right? So I'm like 5'10", I'm tall enough, right? And if we're all standing in armor, there's not a whole lot to differentiate me from one of the guys. However, I can't arm muscle a shot, right?
Oh no, yeah.
You have to, some guys can, because they just do, or some AMAB folk can, right? AFAB people need perfect or much better technique. So if you're finding that they're not taking your shots, or if you're training a female or gender minority fighter, especially an AFAB one, train solid technique. Which
Trumps fitness every time. Look at the old Dukes, right? Some of them haven't stayed in shape, but their technique is great. And that's a really good point. However, we can maximize our training time if we're working on fitness as well.
Do both.
Yeah, do both. Do it all.
All right, I'm going to wrap it up here. And a lot of what I'm going to talk on has already been said, so I'm going to just try to bring it all together. You know, Ingegerd and Puffin talked about listening to the female gender minority fighter. And that's so true, because we're not a one shoe size fits all fighter. We
Thank
each,
you.
just like every male fighter, everyone has different goals. Signy, Ingegerd, and Puffin are on the Squire Knight path. I am not. I'm a melee fighter. I'm a commander. So when I'm at practicing my one-on-ones, because that's a goal of mine, that's not because I want to necessarily become a knight or win crown. I'm doing it for me most of the time. The tournament circuit's not for me, but it's for the other panelists. Some people want to come to practice, more melee practices because they want to do a command role, or some people just want to get good, right? That they just want to get better. They don't know what their end goal is. They want to get better. But the point is, you can't assume that all female fighters want the same thing. And that's why it's so important to ask the questions and to listen, just like you would any male fighter.
And their goals can change too.
Exactly. Over time, like if you find yourself, hey, I'm starting to like win bouts and I'm getting better. Yeah, your goals may change, or you might find a great night. You're like, you know what? I think I want to be squired to this person. That's totally true. And then at practice, when you're talking about practice, so those are more long-term goals, but they're short-term goals. Sometimes I go to practice. This happened recently because I had a crap day that day. And I just needed to get out some frustration. I just needed to hit something, I was just having a bad day. Sometimes it's for fitness. So for those of you who don't know me, I have a young son. I have a 4-year-old. I work full time. And so the practice may be my fitness, one of my 2 workouts I was able to get in this week. And our practices, there's a social component. So some people, want to go to practice because it checks their social box. They could be working on a weapon, new weapon form or a specific shot or move. The point is, at practice, when you're fighting someone, it's great when my opponent says, hey, what are you working on? Are you working on anything? And sometimes the answer is, yeah, I'm trying to work on my defense, or I'm working on this move. Or sometimes it's like, you know what? I just want to fight. I just want to fight today. That's all I want to do. And that's cool. So respecting that, understanding the frame of mind of the woman or gender minority fighter is really important. And then there's obstacles to these goals. As a mom, I'm a caregiver, and people would make fun of me, or be like, Tegan, you never stay for court, because I have my 4-year-old who's been there all day for 6 hours, and he's about to lose his mind. If I don't take this boy home, like there's going to be hell to pay. Or there have been events I've gone to, or even practices I've gone to, where I've had to arrange for a babysitter. And so that 2 hours I have for practice, that's all I get before I have to go home and relieve my sitter. I am like on the clock here. So that's real. And it's not just kids. We all know, you can Google it. All of the studies show that women take on the majority of the caregiving duties. And it's not necessarily kids. It could be you're caring for an aging parent, another loved one. I mean, there are studies all over the place that show that women primarily take on these caregiver roles, and that can interfere with practice and events. You can talk about the mental load that women carry more all the time. When we pack for an event, and my partner is a fighter too, I'm the one with the checklist, the water, the food, the Gatorade, the chairs, the benches, the day shade, the toys for my son so he doesn't have a temper tantrum. That falls on the women. There's plenty of studies who've talked about that.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm interrupting, but it's like, yeah, we don't even have dependents, but it's like dog food,
right.
daycare, all the
Dropping off the
things.
dogs for the week.
Honey,
Yeah.
where's my blue card?
Yeah. Where's that blue
I
card?
know.
Yeah.
I'm with the Duke who's like, where's my white belt? I got my armor in the car. That's cool. And I was just like, what about all the other things,
Yeah.
So.
And then also like internal, a couple of weeks ago on the SCA Coaches Corner, Duke Tim out of Ethelmark talked about how his squire has ADD or ADHD. And so when Duke Tim's training his squire and is throwing a bunch of information at him, there's a point where the squires just like can't absorb it because of the way they internally process information. Or if you're having anxiety, you know, Duke Tim made another point that I thought was really pertinent. Everyone, I feel like, talks about how the SCA is aging. So if you're a young woman, let's say in your 20s, and you're fighting this sport for the first time, and you go to the local practice, you look it up, you know, on Facebook or whatever, I'm like, I'm going to go to this practice and check this out. And all you see are 40, 50, 60-year-old white, you know, older white males, and you're a young woman, that can be intimidating. That does not create a space of comfort or culture. And I think we just all have to be mindful of that. I can tell you here in the North in Atlantia, there's 3 new women fighters up here, and they're all young. They have different backgrounds. Some come from LARPing, whatever. But like, you know, if you're someone who doesn't already have an in, who didn't come in with a group of friends or didn't come to practice with a buddy, and you're just finding this, you know, seeing people that don't look like you can be very intimidating. So we have
Can I add
yeah.
to that really quickly? So there's an actionable step that can help with that, which is you want to have a practice that's welcoming to non-combatants, because you're more likely to at least have some women around. So it's not just a sea of cisgendered looking dudes
Exactly. So
hanging out.
totally,
And
like
it's a little bit more reassuring and inviting for diversity. Like, for instance, there was a woman I met tonight really quickly. She happens to be from West Kingdom. I randomly met this woman. I'm not going to go into it because I've already talked way too much. But the point is, she brought up that she had a child, an adult child, that is non-binary. I'm like, I've got a trans kid. You're in good company. She's like, okay. So just knowing that there's that connection, it helps so much to reassure that this is a safe place for me to go to.
yeah, totally. And so like for my local barony, Ponte Alto, we have our Sundays in the park, which is great because, you know, if I can bring someone to watch Bailey, he can go run around, or I can take turns with my partner. And on our Thursday night practices, we started pairing it with ANS. So that brings, you know, people to the yard. That absolutely works. And the last point I want to talk about is just also your physical obstacles. I mean, you know, if you are still menstruating, some women, their periods are horrible each month. And if you're cramping, if you're having pain, if you're having back spasms, I mean, you could be out of commission for any physical activity for like a week. I mean, and that is very real. And of course, the size differential that Signy talked about, I mean, that's real. So there are like real things that are specific to women, gender minorities here, like, you know, physically as well.
Oh my God, when I'm on my cycle, I'm way more pain sensitive, it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
Like pain doesn't hurt
That's a
more.
study fact. That's a fact.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Talk about getting me, I mean.
And there's no amount of Midol that's gonna cure that.
I used to have to not fight on certain days of my cycle. I have a uterus now, so that's gone forever. Haha. But I literally I would bleed so heavily that I couldn't even make it an hour in armor, much like because I had to get out of armor to do anything about it, and like it was bad. So pain notwithstanding, even if it doesn't hurt, if you're bleeding a lot,
Yeah.
So that's another barrier. And the number of people who are like, oh, I'm so sorry you can't join it. How come you're not? Are you, you know, and then there's the fear of, do they think I'm really serious about fighting? Do they think I'm a washout? Do they think that I'm not committed enough because I'm not willing to, I don't know, have blood dripping down my legs, I guess, while I'm fighting, you know? But that fear is there because that's the culture. So change the culture.
Or it swings the other way where, you know, let's say you're having a cramp and you sit out and then everyone's like, oh my God, are you okay? Are you okay? Guys, I'm just having a menstrual cramp. Like, right.
Girlfriend of mine was a pro athlete. I mean, she was a collegiate level skier, and amazing woman, smoke jumper, everything, so tough. But she would plan ahead for the weeks when she had her cycle, because she's like, I don't perform as well.
Mhm.
She says, I feel like I can't breathe. I feel heavier. She's like, I'm not on top of my game. And it's, yeah, you got to give women some space to deal with that.
Exactly.
You know, if you need a slower practice, or if you just need more time or whatever, it's like, you know, if you're the coach, you should just be like, okay, what's going on? Another time to listen to people, right?
Exactly. So I'm just going to wrap it up here. We do have a bunch of training resources, and I can drop my email in the chat, and anybody who wants a copy of this PowerPoint, I don't think any of us have a problem sharing it at all. There's resources here. And I mean, there's so many more resources, but these are just the ones we could put together.